Hi, is the mic working? Good. So my name is Gummi Hafsteinsson. I'm a product manager in the mobile team, and I'm going to talk about a specific topic within the mobile web, and it's about how to create an interoperable mobile website. And by interoperable, just to be absolutely clear, it's about how to create a website that's going to work on as many devices as possible, which is a challenging task for the mobile web. Now, diving right in, before we get into sort of details how to do that, you obviously want to think about the question, why would I want to do that? Why is that so important as a developer to create a website that works on as many devices as possible? And fortunately, at least in my view, it seems to be an obvious case why you want to do that. So you go through the why you want to, sort of the logic, thought logic through that. And if your website works on lots of mobile devices, clearly your chance of reaching your users are much higher. So more people have the chance of using your mobile website, which in turn, because a lot more people are using the website, the total cost per developer, per user is actually lower. So in aggregate, you're going to have a better cost function for that. And also, if the website is more compatible, the chance of a web search engine being able to find your website are much higher because they actually go by certain rules and certain standards in terms of interpreting content and so on. So overall, it seems like this is an obvious case why you want to do this, but quite frankly, a lot of websites on the mobile web fail to do this, which is kind of weird. So before I go into technical details how to do that, I just want to sort of explore why is it such a difficult task and why are people not doing this the way they probably should be doing it. So let's start with the PC web, which all of you are familiar with. Everything on a PC or Macintosh going to the web, you sort of assume it's interoperable. And it actually is, because there are basically two browsers that are dominant in the space, Firefox and IE. And both of them are pretty much the same. They render the content the same way. And the standards that are being used are pretty much been settled down. So HTML is the standard for the web. And everything seems to be working pretty nicely there. It's a dominant single platform that people rely on and assume is going to be in the case. And so you can kind of assume that when you go on a PC computer, you want to view a website, it's going to work no matter what. And it's pretty easy to develop for because of that, because it's such a common platform. Now, if you go into the mobile web, it's a totally different story. So let's begin with one dimension, which is the markup language. So when WAP was introduced in the late 90s, they created a new markup language called wireless markup language, which is WML for short. It's close to HTML, but not the same. But at the same time, in Japan, they had a different view on this, and they created what's called the CHTML. Both of these are based on standards. So WML came from OMA, the Open Mobile Alliance, and CHTML came from W3C. But the sad fact was that they decided to go with different markup languages. Now, fortunately, in the past years, this has been changing. So it's been converging towards XHTML as a markup language for browsers. But even then, within that, we have two different kinds of profiles. So you have the basic profile and the mobile profile, one from OMA and one from W3C. So again, you still have this fragmentation in the markup language layer, which you have to deal with when you're creating a mobile website. So this doesn't look too bad. It's only 4 markup languages that you have to think about. And in essence, you really have to just think about CHTML for Japan and XHTML for the rest of the world. So far, so good, but still kind of confusing. Now, on to comparing to the PC, where you have mostly IE and then Firefox, it's a totally different story in the mobile space. So you have, here are just 3 examples. OpenWave, Opera, and Access Netfront providing browsers to the world. In reality, it's actually dozens of different browsers. And even within the same, you look at the OpenWave browsers, there are lots of different versions and different variations. And trying to deal with this fragmentation is really challenging if you want to really understand the nuances of each different browser that's on the market right now. So again, it's another dimension. In addition to the markup language, you have to think about all the different browsers out there. So now you see it's becoming a multi-dimensional problem. And then add another dimension now, suddenly you have all kinds of different devices. So different screen sizes, different input mechanisms, and so on, ranging from tiny monochrome devices, and yes, they still exist in the market, all the way up to the smartphones. So you go for the Palms and the Nokia's, high-end Nokia devices. You get a big screen, color, and so on. So now, when you think about all these different things, all the different devices, it's a big mess. Different screen sizes, different browsers, different mechanism for inputting and outputting content. And then on top of that, the different markup languages. It's tempting to say, well, either just give up and I'm not going to do a mobile website, or you try to engineer a really complicated solution that's going to try to deal with all the nuances, different challenges, and so on, and try to basically solve the problem, attack the problem as a complicated problem. Now, if there's just one thing I would like to take away from this presentation, if you want to go through it, it's basically ignore the complexity and just try to keep it simple. And it sounds maybe counterintuitive, but as I go through this, you'll see why this is really, really important. Upfront, trying to optimize for every single device in the world is probably not realistic. And really, if you just focus on providing basic functionality to mobile web users, you will get a lot of bang for your bucks. And you actually get a lot of good coverage out of taking that approach. So keeping that in mind, keep it simple. I'm not going to talk through a few simple steps that can be taken to make sure that if you're creating a mobile website, it's going to work on a wide range of different handsets out of the box without a lot of effort. So to begin with, you really want to get one site right first. You just want to think about what's the primary use case that people who have a mobile phone want to get out of my service. So you want to think about that, and you want to really design that, and you want to make sure that you're not trying to keep all the mess that I just showed you. You want to sort of keep that to the side for now. You just want to focus on getting this one site right and making it work on even just a handful of devices to begin with. And how do you do that? So there are a few things about the mobile web that a lot of people don't know about, especially people coming from the desktop web. The first one is when you're creating a mobile web, you really, really need to keep the markup well-formed. XHTML is based on XML, so if you don't provide a valid XML, the chances are that a lot of the browsers out there on mobile devices are going to fail in some way. And the reasons are actually more going to the technical side of it. The reasons are because these devices are small, they have limited memory and limited computation power. So basically what they put on these devices are very standards compliant parsers, as opposed to when you look at IE and Firefox, they put the standards compliant parsers, then they have lots of exception rules to deal with the nuances of, oh, the developer forgot to close the tag, or there's some random code inside of the HTML. That doesn't exist in the mobile web. So you really want to make sure you're not trying, you need to do the work up front for the parser, because the parser is usually either going to get the content or it's just going to crash into some very interesting ways. So make sure whatever content you create, you really make sure open close tags, do all the proper XML stuff. So this is a very simple mobile web page. Now, in order to make it XML compliant, like I just said, you really also want to have the preamble and doc type. And this is a very common thing that people forget to add, because they're so used in HTML and web, you just throw an HTML tag, some heads and some bodies, and you're done, and that's it. Now, in the mobile web, you really want to make sure, in order to be fully compliant with the standards, to include both the preamble and doc type. And this is the doc type for XHTML Basic, which is probably the preferred language you want to go with for mobile websites. So now this website here, like you can see in Firefox, it shows you hello world, which is not that interesting. So it's easy to look at this web page and, yeah, I can sort of scan the page and be compliant because I know everything is okay. But what if you have a real website, which is beyond this simple stuff that I'm just showing you? What are the tools that I can use to make it really compliant? And that's where you go to W3C is out there to help us with that. So they have a tool that's called the validator, and the URL is on the bottom, and I think we're posting these slides after the presentation, so you can take a look at that. But really, if you go to this website, you can enter any XHTML content, and the validator will go through it, and they will find if there's anything wrong with the content. They will point to the exact line number and what exactly is wrong and how to fix it. So by all means, use the tool for every single web page you're creating to make sure that you're doing the heavy lifting beforehand and not having the mobile browser deal with this. And when you think about it, when you provide this provide a mobile web page to users, you might be able to test a few handsets, but really, chances of you being able to test every handset in the world are extremely slim. So there are chances, if you don't go by these rules and you don't really make a standards compliant website, there are going to be people trying to use your mobile websites, and they're going to have the phones crashing, which is really a bad thing, or memory exceptions and so on. So in order to avoid these things, It's better to be safe and secure beforehand, much more important than on the web right now. Now, another thing which is also important is to specify the character encoding. Again, the parsers on the phones don't have a sophisticated logic to figure out the character encoding, so if you don't specify, they'll probably assume something, and most likely they're going to assume something wrong, and your website is going to look screwed up. It's a very simple way, and like with all XML content, we encourage using UTF-8, and that's the language that every single browser, except for maybe in Japan, is going to understand. And there are two ways, really simple ways to specify the encoding. You do it in the preamble. That's the first example on the slide. Or you can do it in an HTTP header, depending on what kind of web server you have and what kind of access you have to the logic, which one is more convenient for you to offer. But this also reduces a lot of the problems with incorrectly marked up web pages. So one of the benefits I mentioned at the beginning was to make sure that the search engine will be able to find you. So Google and all the other major search engines provide what's called a sitemap. And for those of you who don't know what sitemap is, it's a very simple tool. It's basically you can provide a list of URLs to websites that you want to make sure that a search engine can find. Submit it to the search engine, and then the search engine goes out and finds the content based on that and adds it to the index. This is useful on the web, as we all know, but even on a mobile web, it's even more important, and the reasons are twofold. So first of all, when you create a new mobile website and put it out on the web, most likely there's nobody pointing to it. And if nobody's pointing to your website, nobody's going to find it. The search engine can't find anything if the search engine goes through following links to find stuff, and if there's no link to your website, you're not going to get indexed into the search engine, so people using the search engine won't find your content. Now that's pretty obvious, I think. But the second point, which is more subtle, is the way people use the mobile web. So on the desktop, you might provide a URL and people just type it into the browser. On the mobile web, most people don't type in URLs into the browsers, either because they don't know how to do that, or just don't avoid long typing with dots and slashes and all kinds of weird characters. So what they do is they fire up the favorite search engine, and they type in things they want to find, and then they use navigation links to follow on to that. So people who will go, for example, to BBC are more likely to open up Google and type in BBC and then follow the top link on that page. So again, if Google, Yahoo, whatever search engine you want to make sure people can find you through doesn't know about your site, and people are trying to find it through search, it's really important that the sitemap has been submitted so that the engine knows about where to find your content. And for more information, this URL gives you all the documentation and the way to submit that to Google. Going beyond this simple markup sort of techniques and all that, there's also a lot of usability things you have to keep in mind when you're creating a good website. And fortunately, W3C has a working committee that spent a lot of time thinking about what are the ways you can use to create a mobile website that actually performs well, has all the right accessibility, the usability, and so on, and really caters well to the mobile device. So this link provides what's called the mobile web best practices. And Google and a lot of other companies have participated in this working group to make sure that all the combined knowledge of and expertise of creating mobile websites is combined into this document. So you have, for example, these are just random examples from the guidelines. Think about the image width and the size. Do resizing on the server side. You'd be amazed how many websites actually throw a really large picture at a mobile phone, and you can guess what the results is over a limited bandwidth and a limited memory device. You have devices crashing, or even worse, you have people paying for a huge picture, which is then going to be shown like this. Use access keys, very important. A lot of people don't know how to do that, but these guidelines show you how to do that. Access keys are the number keys mapped onto a specific function. So an example for a Google application does that, Gmail. Whatever you're in the Gmail application on the mobile web, you can always hold down the 0 key and you go back to the inbox. And it's a power user feature, but once people realize how to do that, navigating through a mobile website becomes so much easier because you can use the number keys to quickly go between functions as opposed to scrolling down and clicking on links and doing all the complicated things, which can be pretty annoying if you're using the application a lot. So these are just examples of tips that they have in this document, but I would recommend if you're thinking about creating a mobile website, go to this website and look through all it. These are basically step-by-step tips that they provide, and you can kind of use that, and really technical, so they show exactly how to do it in the markup language. Another organization which is working towards creating an interoperable mobile website, sort of the same agenda as this presentation, is called .mobi. .mobi, if you're not familiar with .mobi, is a top-level domain. So websites can be something .mobi. So Google.mobi goes to Google, the mobile version of Google, for example. And in addition to being a top-level domain, they've also worked with the W3C and other organizations to create sort of best practice and guidelines and helping people to create good websites in addition to just providing a domain to use mobile website. So this is on a good place to go, and here's the link on the slide to learn more about how to create a really useful mobile website. And again, it's about simplicity, making sure that you're really thinking about what do people want to do with my mobile website. Don't cram everything into it. And the one example that I have of how to think about when you're creating a mobile website, what should be on it, was, and it doesn't exist right now, but this is still a good example to talk about. So think about sites like eBay. When you go to eBay on your PC, you're doing lots of different things. You might be searching with things, you might want to do a bidding, all kinds of functionality that you want to probably do if you have a big screen and a computer and a big connection. But if you think about eBay on a mobile device, the whole thing changes. You don't want to take everything eBay offers and provide it through a small screen. You probably just want to focus on a few things. And eBay might then go and say, well, we're just going to provide a functionality if overbidding happens. And so you can look at your existing bids, know if there's an overbid, and then place a new bid. So it's just an example of how really think about the user in the context of a mobile device. And these guidelines help you sort of think also in that context in terms of accessibility and usability. Now, when you're developing a website, you also want to make sure that it works decently. And there are a lot of tools out there that help you do that. And these are just examples of a few tools that can help you. Every major handset manufacturer also has developer connection websites where you can go and you can find these tools. So you go to Nokia's developer website, you can go to Sony Ericsson. They all have tools that emulate the browsers on the phones, which you can run on a PC or a Mac. And you can use that to try the website on the computer as you're developing it. And if you follow these guidelines of keeping it simple and being status compliant, and then they work in the emulator, you have a very high chance of the website being very functional and good when you go out to providing it to the users. One thing to note in this case, though, is that if you're doing proper QA, you want to do that on the device. You never want to rely on an emulator. A lot of cases we've seen things run perfectly nice on an emulator because it's running inside an environment that's actually very rich. It's got a high bandwidth connection and a decent CPU power. But once you try things on the device itself, you'll notice both the bandwidth constraints and other things that might actually not work. You'll pick up those bugs when you go to the mobile device. And I'll show you an example of a website that actually, if you would try it only on an emulator, it would probably be okay. But once you go into real life, you'll see it's not that good. So going back to when you're creating this website for mobile devices, so to begin with, you really want to make sure all your sites work really well on entry-level phones. And you'll be surprised by how many people have what we call entry-level phones. So like the Nokia 6230 in the UK, for example, is a phenomenally popular device. A lot of people have that device, even though it's not. I don't think it's even sold anymore. But a lot of people are using websites through that device. So you want to make sure that your website is actually compliant. And you want to try out a few of these phones just to get a flavor of how it feels and so on. And you definitely don't want to have something like this happen. And you'd be surprised how often this happens when you have a website and it doesn't take a lot. I mean, something that goes like a snap, and this is something you might be able to run on an emulator. Everything is working fine because there's lots of memory going on there and all that. And then you take it onto the mobile on the mobile device, and quite often this will happen. This is actually what I would call a good exception. The bad exceptions are when the phone literally just crashes. And I remember way back when I was starting in this and doing mobile development, we had this Nokia 7110, which is one of the first web phones. And it has you click a button and the cover of the keypad slides out. But all the developers wished they had a second button to slide out the battery because it would hang so badly all the time that we had to take the battery out. And that would actually be a much more useful button for us to do. But this is dating way back in end of 99, 2000, these issues still happen. We still have phones that you might go to a trivial website, what we think is a trivial website, but something is wrong with the markup or something wrong with the pictures being downloaded and so on, and it just crashes badly. And you certainly want to have your users go through that experience of a phone hanging so badly that they have to take the battery out, which in some cases people don't even know how to do. Now, once you get the entry site working really well, and that's a site that's going to work for a lot of devices, you probably want to move upscale to some of the more sophisticated devices. Here are some examples of what we call a mid-range device, like the Nokia 6680 or the N70, which are also quite popular in the UK and other European countries. It's tempting to really want to sort of exploit these devices and do something really funky and cool on them and add a lot of functionality and make them really rich. But still, I would really encourage taking a good look at sort of why you're doing it. So let's say, example, if you're doing a financial website or provides a financial service, your audience might be like to have a BlackBerry. So pick up the BlackBerry and make it work better on the BlackBerry because of the screen size or the bandwidth and so on. That's a good example of a good sort of optimization. If you're just doing optimization because you think there's some good devices out there that might take advantage of that and you're not really sure where you're heading with that, it's probably a bad idea. These devices also have limitations, and even if they don't have the limitations, the user experience might be so bad that you really don't want to get into that challenge. So another example, and the reason I chose CNN is actually because they do the right thing in this space. So that's why I feel like I can sort of pick on them a little bit. On the left-hand side, I managed, and this is actually on a real device running, I managed to get to the full HTML website through my mobile phone. It took 10 minutes to download. So right there off the bat, you probably lost most users if you provided that as an experience. Then, once I've managed to get the website, I don't even see any headlines. It's crowded with navigation links to begin with, so you want to take the HTML as is and provide it to the device. This device is trying to act like a full browser in this case, but it really isn't a full browser. So there has to be some optimizations for this case. So there's a bad experience using that website directly on a mobile phone. On the right-hand side, however, they also have a mobile version of CNN, which is the site they want you to go to, and you usually end up when you have a mobile phone. And it took a few seconds to load, which is fine. It's clearly the lowest common denominator site. This does the basic stuff really well. It shows you a picture from the headline. I can immediately see what's going on. I can scroll down to other headlines. And sort of if you go back to all the things I just talked about, I think they've done a fantastic job of making sure that this, even on a mid-range phone like this, they provide a really good experience. And I'm sure they're not doing a lot of complicated device detection and trying to sort of attack the complicated matrix because this is really good enough in many cases. So they're just done, and I get my headlines, I can read the news, and that's really what I'm after in this case. So just to summarize, we want to go back to the beginning. We asked the question, like, why do you want to do and why do you want to create an interoperable mobile web? And it's really about making sure that no matter what kind of device people might have, you want to make sure your website actually works for that person. That's more important than adding some bells and whistles and trying to make a really complicated website. And again, because you really focused on keeping it simple, your cost is actually going to be lower than otherwise. And you really take the proper steps to make sure the website is well-formed and well done. You're going to end up with a relatively short cycle of development. It's very easy to get sucked into a very long and expensive development cycle, buying expensive tools, just because the problem seems so complicated up front. And I would encourage you trying this out first, and then if you need to, you can do the more customization and tailoring. And finally, obviously, because the site is well-formed and a search engine can understand what's going on and can understand the content on it, they're much more likely to be able to provide the results to the users when people search for something that might be on your website. So that's it for the how to create an interoperable mobile website. And I'm happy to take any questions now if you have any. So I think we have a roaming mic somewhere here. He had a question over there. Oh. Okay.
I believe the example of the XML schema you gave up front that you preferred although I might be reading something into it you weren't saying, was the XHTML basic. But if I recall correctly, I've got a .mobi site, and the one you have to use in order to be compliant, or they take your domain down, is in fact the XHTML Mobile 1.0, so a different one straight away.
The mobile profile?
Yeah. Otherwise, they take your site down nominally, I believe. They remove your registration.
The interesting thing about XHTML mobile profile and basic, what happened actually is that most, or I think even all XHTML browsers out there right now, they support both, and they treat them both pretty much the same. They're not exactly the same. There's a small difference between styling in both of them, but pretty much that has pretty much converged into, it doesn't really matter which one, but maybe .mobi wants to go for the mobile profile because
I mean, I think they've done the right thing, which is to try and improve the user experience. They've insisted that everyone is compliant with a particular standard. It just happens not to be the one that you pick, which is, I was just interested if...
So that's a really, I'll make sure to, if it's the mobile
profile. Well, I hope I'm wrong and you pick the right one, in which case I'll change mine.
No, but thank you for pointing it out. That's a really good point. And I agree. You want to converge towards one standard that is the one you want to go for. There's a question over there on the other side.
When you talk about for basically working to like the baseline models and then providing perhaps additional sort of things for things like BlackBerry or whatever, what's the best way to deal with that? Is it down to user agent sniffing, or are there any other ways of working out what capabilities you're actually serving to?
So probably the best approach is to go for the user agent. There are some tools out there and databases you can use, like WRFL, WURFL. Which provides a lot of information, and you can use, it takes user agents and combine them into families, so you can quickly hone down into this user agent string is actually a BlackBerry, and I think that's probably the best approach if you need to do the tailoring, to go for that. There are some nuances again, and that's actually where you might get into trouble with some of the cases where the user agent might not be that helpful, or it might be that the user agent is modified by the gateway in between. But those are fortunately few and far between, and you can probably assume that the user agent is going to give you the information you need. Another thing in a user agent string, actually sometimes you have information about screen resolution and things like that, especially on the higher-end devices. So you can, even without going to a database with all the information, you can often glean a lot of information from the user agent string, which is really useful.
Thanks.
With the user agent sort of looking up, is it not going down the sort of dodgy route that internet development, web down, which is, all the advice nowadays is basically, comply to the standards and worry about how each one's implemented it, and then you won't have such a nightmare maintaining it when a new BlackBerry comes out or a new mobile phone. Is that just not an easier answer? A better answer?
It's a very good question. So when I was starting off in this, it was back in 98 and 99, we saw sort of all these devices coming out, and we were exactly doing this user agent matching and trying to deal with all the different nuances and challenges within this space. And we thought exactly, we're just doing a temporary hack right now, because 2 years from now, everyone's going to have exactly standard-based, and it's going to be fully compliant, and we're going to all be happy. Now, 7, 8 years later, it's not happened yet. So unfortunately, and I agree, you want to be able to say, well, it doesn't really matter which browser is coming in. It's all about being standards compliant. And it is slowly converging and evolving in that direction. But even then, just by the nature of this being a different kind of device, it's not a PC. You might have a narrow screen just because people wanted a narrow screen phone. You might have a wide screen. So even within the standards compliant, everything is going by the standards. You might want to do some customization based on some information you have back in. And that's why I encourage you to pause and think before you head into that direction. You don't want to just assume that you have to do it all the time. You really want to think, why do I need to do that? Because it becomes such a rat's nest. If you do that for every single device, it's an infinite problem. It never stops. You have to continuously be updating and maintaining that information. It's really about, do you have an audience that has some extra need or something? And think from the user's point of view. Don't think about the technology. Think like the BlackBerry example. And deal with those, but leave the other ones just up to the standards compliance. And I think the more content we have that's going by the standards compliance, that's actually pushing the whole industry into that direction that we want. That's the preferred way of doing things. And the browser vendors and the mobile handset vendors, they actually noticed that, and then they kind of converge also to make sure. It's been a rocky road, but it's slowly happening. I think the user agent detection is going to be still relevant because of small differences, but that's hopefully going to sort of become it's less relevant as we move forward, and this becomes a more mature industry.
Thanks. Hi. Can you talk a little bit about your mobile search index? 8 months ago, your mobile search index was composed of Google processed HTML sites, which was frustrating for mobile developers. You were ignoring true XHTML sites. Can you say anything about the ranking, your ranking algorithm, how you crawl?
So unfortunately, I'm not the expert on the ranking algorithm per se, but we did make, and so just to describe sort of what was happening, like I said, 8 months ago, we had 2 separate indexes. One was for the full web, basically HTML, which we then took and converted into mobile markup language, and that's what we call transcoding. And then there's another sort of set of web pages that are actually created for the mobile websites. That's the kind of website I'm just talking about in this presentation. And those were treated differently. So we had if you did a search on google.com, let's say January this year, you would actually have to choose, do you want to search the web, or do you want to choose the mobile, or do you want to search the mobile web? And technically, that was that's an easy solution for us to do, but to the user, that was wildly confusing. And add to that we said, search the web or the mobile web, and then you said, well, the mobile web is in beta. It added even more to the confusion. Fortunately, and this has just happened in the US, but we're sort of obviously working on localizing to other languages. We've now, with the new search UI, this has all gone away. So we treat the whole thing as one. Doesn't matter if we transcode the HTML websites or there's a mobile website that has the content, and we blend the results into one. So if you do a search for, let's say, CNN, you don't have to choose what you want to get. We actually give the mobile website higher preference because that's what we know is going to be strictly tailored for the mobile device. So I hope the frustration that a lot of
the transcoding was not always of quality.
Obviously, that's exactly. So, and the other thing which we do, and the transcode is always done, if the website is a mobile website, we don't transcode it. We pass it through as is. We actually send the user directly to the website, the mobile version of the website. But this problem should be gone in the US and should be going away soon in other countries. And we want people to provide mobile content because usually that's high quality, because it's strictly tailored for the mobile device.
Is transcoding on its way out?
No, it's if you think about sort of the amount of content that exists out there, there's some segment of mobile content, and when we can find that, we're happy, we provide it to the user. But people search for all kinds of things that there are no mobile websites for. And that's where you hit the long tail, and that's where the transcoding actually hits in really nicely, where you can find content that has never been meant to be shown on a mobile device. You can still access it on a mobile device. So it's not going away. We're just doing the blending finally, which is a much better user experience.
So how can we let you know this is where the mobile version of this site is?
So the question was, and repeat for the camera, how can you let us know that this is the mobile version of the website? That's for the sitemap. So in the sitemaps, there's a mobile sitemap. You say, this is a mobile website, this is the markup language it's provided in, here's the language and so on, and that's how you can point us to those mobile websites.
So say you have a very complex site,
Oh,
CNN,
I see.
and you have a very complex mobile site. How
Yeah.
do you say that you were saying you gave priority on pages, so how do you say that this is the equivalent page to that one and you put it as priority in your search?
There's a standardized meta tag that can add to the top of the HTML page. I think it's in the style, actually, where you can say, mobile version, go to this URL. And we actually detect that, and we know how to treat that, and we go to the mobile site because that's the preferred. And that's the content developers telling us, if you want to provide this to a mobile device, go to this alternative URL, which we're going to find a much better version of it. And it's up to the content developer to kind of define which makes more sense in each context. Any other questions?
Thanks. It's a rather broad and possibly vague question, but Do you recommend developing a separate website there for the mobile audience from your main website, or is it better to make your main website more standards compliant, so it's got the potential for mobile compatibility and you don't have to maintain two separate websites?
So there's a sort of yes and no answer to this question. It depends. So if you believe the website has the functionality for the audience on the web and on the mobile that's sort of similar, and you can make sure the website is not too big that it's not going to fit onto a mobile device, you can probably get away with a really well-formed website and using style sheets to make sure it looks good on mobile devices as well. And there's a lot of sites that actually do that, and it works pretty well. However, there's also a lot of websites where you want to emphasize different kind of functionality, different kind of content on the mobile side. And it's not about technology anymore. It's about what do the users want? What are people looking for when they go to your website? When I go to CNN.com on my mobile phone, I'm looking for breaking news. When I go to CNN.com on my computer, I might be browsing all kinds of categories and maybe searching kind of to the sports news and browsing and all that. So it's a different kind of use. And I think even news is not a good example because the distinction is not big enough. In many cases, you really want to just emphasize one simple thing and provide that to the user. So again, then you really have to tailor that functionality. And it becomes a user interface development project, which is beyond technology limitations. It's about sort of UX, user experience.
What kind of growth are you seeing in mobile usage from Google's perspective?
So obviously, I can't comment on any specifics, but
relative to the past sort of, I mean, mobile's been around for almost 10 years, so are we seeing it kind of exponentially? It could be quite gradual over the
so in the past, let's say past year or so, we've seen a phenomenal growth in mobile usage in general. All our mobile products have really been growing fast, and we've seen a lot of interest in this space. People seem to be realizing that the phone can do more than voice and text messaging, and there's actually something beyond data than ringtones and wallpapers. So this is all about the awareness and people realizing how to use this. And I think some of the products that have been launched from Google and others actually have helped in this space. So our web search, which is always getting better and better, has helped raise this awareness. Google Maps is another example of a product that really has captured people's imagination. Say, wow, that's actually, I can use my phone to navigate myself around. And so as we see, and other companies have clearly also offered a lot of good products in this space. And so I'm excited about this. Having been in this space through the whole web hype and seeing the whole go up and everything inside and then crash really badly, I say sort of finally it's happening.
And just one last point. You talked about searches being executed from a mobile device, then you would rank a mobile site higher than the standard site that a company may have online. If a company has a mobile site as well as a standard browser site, will the existence of that mobile site benefit the ranking of that standard site? I know you said you're not the right person to speak about rankings, but presumably you would look to combine the existence of those two sources of data because that increases presumably the credibility of the publisher.
So, again, I'm not the expert on this, but it's not necessarily that we always take a mobile site and bump it up to the top. That's not really true either. We look at all these. We look at both our transcoded version of websites and the mobile sites that are specifically created for websites, and we pull them together and we jointly rank them all. Now, specifically, if there's a website that then points to a mobile website, I don't know the details of what's the impact on that in terms of relevancy. I think there's still some sort of neutral approach to this that if we think the relevancy is high, the site's going to go high into this. And the relevancy depends on the query that's coming in that's asking for that particular content. But to be honest, I don't know the answer exactly to that question. But I can point to the people who do know the answers to those questions.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about geo-targeting on mobiles and how to access that information and any issues that might be between different handsets and what kind of stuff you get out of the box. Is that all accessible through like WML script or like also like how do you access the address book and various other like features of actually integrating with a mobile device?
So specifically for the mobile web, usually it's up to the device in many cases to provide access to this kind of information. So in most cases, you don't get access to what's called a geolocation, which might be a result from a GPS lookup or a cell ID lookup. The website is not going to have access to that information. It's running inside of a limited container, and usually there's not even JavaScript to have any kinds of scriptable functionality to do this. So in that case, there's no access to that geolocation on the device. If you want to create an application, the situation is sort of the same. In many cases, there is no access to the GPS or any kind of location information from an application, but there's still some devices coming out like the Nokia N95 where you actually have a GPS and it's open. And that's actually a fantastic development, I think, that this is becoming more available to application developers and hopefully in the future as well, web developers, that they can get access to this location information. Same thing with like address book and other kinds of advanced functionality. On the web, there's usually no access to any of these. You have to assume that it's back in '95 on the web. There's no access to anything on the computer. You're just a content rendering website. You can communicate back to your own server, but you can't communicate to the actual device that you're running on top of. But I think as more browsers are coming out with JavaScript functionality in the mobile space, we'll see this development sort of hopefully grow over the next few years. My guess is that there's going to be more push from developers that they really want to get access to this. And again, like with the standards compliant question, the more developers, the more functionality is being provided that wants to take advantage of this functionality. The handset manufacturer and the carriers are actually going to want to open that up because that's going to really create the next generation of useful applications.
So you're saying that Google has no access to location information from a phone with all of the mobile apps it currently has?
So that's specifically on the web. We don't have access to any of the location functionality on the phone. In Google Maps, for certain kinds of handset that do have GPS and provide access to it, we can get access to it. So the Nokia N95 and the BlackBerry 8800, for example, both of them have open access to GPS. And when you have a Google Maps application, and that's a J2Me application on the phone, we can actually pinpoint the user through the GPS in that case.
So how do you integrate with a J2ME application through WAP or through accessing a website? Does that initiate like the applet to be downloaded and then run, or is that going to be a user initiation? They've got to say, I want this J2ME app downloaded, and then to actually run that.
So right now, unfortunately, you have to go to a website to download the application, and then from then on, you engage with the application or you engage with the web browser. There's no standardized way of combining these two experiences, which would be ideal, where you can do a search for a pizza place on google.com, and when you find the place, you say, well, show me a map, and it launches Google Maps, the application. But right now, that's not possible with the current technology.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, can I just add something to that one?
Sure.
It's about the location. It is possible to do something with the network. You have a partner, so the network can provide the website with the phone number in an HTTP header, and then you can do an API query to the network to get a location. But it's expensive and requires you to pay the network lots of money or part of it.
Yeah, so actually, for that matter, the recently announced partnership with Vodafone uses that kind of technology to get the location. And that's where we work with a cell phone operator to get access to that kind of functionality.
So growth and usage in the mobile web seems to be strong, but are there any signs of revenues catching up? And have you got any exciting new product ideas up your sleeve?
So revenues and then product ideas. Revenue, it's interesting how Google works. Right now we're focused on optimizing the user experience and making sure we're providing useful functionality to people. If you think about Google, how it started and going back, for a long time Google didn't have any revenue. We were just making sure the user experience better and better and better, and then we figured out how do we make money out of it. And we're taking the same approach to the mobile space. Having said that, we do have mobile advertising that's running. And for example, in Japan, it's been wildly successful because it's a very mature market. So clearly, we're working in that direction. In terms of new products coming out, clearly I can't really comment on that. That's probably as expected. So, there's
Last
a question in the
question.
front. Oh, okay.
Can you do applets on mobile web?
Java applets?
Yeah.
So the question is, can you do Java applets on mobile? Short answer, no. Unfortunately, there's no JVM or Java runtime inside of the browser that can kind of show you an object like you can do on the web. The trend seems to be more towards scripting functionality, providing JavaScript functionality in some of the new browsers. So you have the new Series 60 browser for Nokia high-end phones, which does have full HTML, CSS, and JavaScript support.
Does Google developing a new mobile device?
So you're asking about the rumors. We never comment on any rumors that are floating in the market space.